Well, well, welcome to my live stream that nobody's at, and even care if you find it or whatever. Pretty much, it's a night for messing with frequencies, which I think a lot of us on the fringe enjoy messing with, and people giving their personal testimonials in the sense of how they're perceiving frequency. I'm totally into it, and I think that why not talk about it just in a public place that my view towards social media is if people find you, great. If they don't, that's not a bad thing in the sense that a select few will want to connect with that. And so I don't want to appeal to everybody. Right now, what you're listening to in the background is some frequency on this online scanner, and it's putting out Morse code. So how I'm messing with frequency tonight is very tangible, very realizable, something you can do for yourself. And so I'm picking up this scanner. I found a frequency that I didn't find offensive in the sense that it's not overwhelming for you or me. And maybe there's something in there that you can um, pick up on that isn't really my expertise. And then, so when we're talking about frequency, the frequency I'm putting out, the frequency you're putting out, the frequency that this frequency is putting out, our interpretations of all of this overlapping. Frequency 222. Okay, that seems legit. So I guess if you wanted to follow along with frequency 222, you could go to NA5, the number 5, B.com, and then colon 8901. If you go there, you can check out all kinds of frequencies on all kinds of bands. And this isn't supported or sponsored. This is just something I do in my free time. You're welcome. Who am I? Why does it even friggin' matter? Obviously, my name is not Cramsnicken, though probably in some dimension it is. And that's a byproduct of just feeling super feisty when I get cramps. And what better name to give it than Crampsnicken? So welcome to my moon time. I'm sure that's really going to draw an audience. So I was listening to this dude earlier on YouTube who goes by the name of Space Cadet. His name is Corey. He doesn't have a lot of viewers and he doesn't have a lot of videos, but he did this really intense breakdown through his perception of what Twin Peaks represents on a greater script. And this is something we've known about for a very long time, that people fall into archetypes. And you can be more than one archetype, but primarily you'll probably be driven toward one. But certain people can make us more adaptable or resistant, and those can bring out other archetypal features. Those are frequencies that are blasting or have been blasted across our matrix for so long that it's really hard for an individual to imagine themselves um, uniquely and individually without using an archetype as a structural basis, a foundation, or a skeletal structure for who they think they are or want to be. So then you go into all the labels and things like this, and how you can live many lives in one lifetime just by moving around, changing friends, jobs, directions of focus. And when we do that, we get an opportunity to sort of portal ourselves into new lifestyles, new lifetimes. And I apologize for that. That wasn't for you. But you got it anyway, didn't you? just how people can start out thinking that they are one way based off of how they're raised and then how they perceive themselves to be and then how they grow or change or meet life circumstances that put them in a different position that causes adaptability or forces adaptability. I love all this stuff, and it's been really interesting for me in my lifetime because I lost a parent very young. I lost my mother, and I was only 4 years old, but I was blasted with a really hard reality at a very young age that was like this person who was taking care of me, I've always been told I should rely on is no longer here. And I went through mental conundrums or whatever where it wasn't quite real to me because I didn't go to the funeral. Me, my brother, and my cousins all came down with the chicken pox. And so we were unable to go to the funeral. So that created another layer of this isn't real and detachment. And so then subconsciously, but somewhat consciously, without telling other people about it, I would still be looking for my mother everywhere on the slight, paranoia or something that she had just left our family and gone to live a whole other life with other people in the same town that's not that big. So going to the grocery store, walking down the aisles and looking for my mother who had died by this point about uh, 10 years earlier. There was a point that I just had to face it. But there's also then this multidimensionality that perhaps because of the way things unfold, it's supposed to bring your attention to certain things. And one of the most modern tropes, I would say, in like specifically the Disney cinematic world is taking away the mother. And people talk about it all the time and Disney's own hangups and all this stuff and how it is so featured in the movies. And it really kind of puts the female characters in an awkward situation of not having positive role models, and then the role models that they do have are more fantastical than they are practical. And the ones that may be a little bit practical are also generally kind of enemies. So a lot of pitting women against each other, which is so terrible and such a weird thing to have in your world. I could go a lot into that, but what we're here for is frequencies and messing with them. So mostly if we sit here and we talk about these frequencies and we recognize where the patterns lie in our own lives, we can definitely start to decipher that stuff and also look into our families and see where the overlap is from how they came into the world and operated in it and then passed that on to us, whether it was consciously or not. And then even further back and back and back. And as much as genealogy is interesting, if we just are actually observational people, it will tell us so much of what we need to know for a foundation of where things might feel weird, but we can't necessarily uh, pinpoint it or whatever. What is an experience with that? All right. Well, just talking about the mom stuff and the overlaps. So my mom died on her mother's birthday, which I think just when you think about that alone is super weird, right? What a birthday gift. But then later receiving the information that somebody else had perceived, maybe not the strangeness of it, but the beauty of it, because the best gift that my mother could give her mother was to stop her from suffering in the sense of worry about this impending death. And I was like, "Well, that's sick and twisted, but also beautiful. Yes, yes." But that's the truth of the world, right? The sick and twisted part that it actually makes more sense than it doesn't, but when people say that doesn't make sense, it's like you're not thinking hard enough or observing deep enough into it. I find that beautiful because it shows how important timing is that we don't necessarily feel like we have control over, and that it's a syncing up of things in a certain nature when that happens and it's not purposely provoked, like, yeah, there is a big difference between sacrificing something on a whatever occulted day and harnessing energy and doing that than there is what would be seen a person organically, well, if by having cancer, that's organic, passing away on the same day that their mother was born. Also, there were there were other weird things that happened in the female lines of my family. Um, I've been privy, you might say, to having certain intuition and premonition, and the I had a premonition of when my aunt would die and that I would become an aunt, and those things coincided in the same day. It's like my sister did her pregnancy test at my house, and I knew she was pregnant before she did, in all technicality of looking at the test. And when I opened the door, what I wanted to say to her was, "Congratulations, it's gonna be a girl." But that's weird, and my family knows I'm a little different, whatever whatever their personal charts from 1 to 10 of weird are. They they all have their own, perception about that. So, it wouldn't be totally out of line to say something like that, but it also I felt, some sort of impression upon me to have a modicum of tact and to let her feel as if, of course, she was the first person to know, and she probably did know before that point without actually acknowledging it, right? So, that was her first child, my first niece, and I think that that's so beautiful that there's this passing on of some sort of niece, aunt to niece energy that, but also I don't want it to go into these crazy cycles. So, personally in my life, I recognize the cycles of the people that I'm close to, and then I also realize how I mimic and reflect those cycles in tandem. So, it's complicated because I want them to notice it too, and then we can be support systems and stepping out of those things. But instead, I feel like the mirror in a way where I don't feel an exorbitant drive to one up anybody anymore in my life or to try and seem like a better example, uh, especially out of illusion. I want to do things because I genuinely feel drawn to do them, and so where these reflections fold over, it's not pleasant, but I'm not exactly sure how to, um, I don't know, operate within the construct and have it be pleasant all the time. I don't I really don't know. Um, there are definitely still things that I'm working through for sure. So I'll try not to get too hard on myself, but it is hard because when you want to be and do everything for everybody, you want to fill all the archetypes, you want to be all the archetypes. And you don't want anybody to go in a certain lack, but it's really hard to realize how to do that because there is no construct on how to do that. So frequency wise, obviously a lot of our history and a lot of the compounded feelings that people are feeling right now is all just this regressive, sweep it under the rug kind of mentality and pretend it isn't happening. And so that's being unveiled right now, which I love because I resonate with that. You know, I've been writing in journals for years because I got to get it out there. But I don't really have much of a social life. So, and I don't necessarily have much of a social life where people relate on this level with themselves or the world and want to talk about it. Um, so why not here? Let me knock some stuff over while I get really excited. Uh, I apologize for all the ahs and ums. It's been a really long time since I've been on YouTube, and I wasn't really going live at that point in time because it was a long time ago. I like to think that we're on a different timeline now, and I can just come over here and put on the live button, and whatever happens, happens. I'm not trying to piss anybody off. Okay. I'm really not trying to get involved in too much other than you hear the friggin' Morse code in the background? Yeah, that's, hey, I'm here. I don't know what that actually says. Hey, I'm here. I'm here. I have things to say too. I probably should. It gets tiresome bottling them into your own body and then dealing with the physical consequences. Oh, the physical consequences of frequency. This stuff is nuts between what people are perceiving as like ascension symptoms and then the fear of what 5G is and then radiation from the sun and geoengineering and just like all of these things, all of these things, all of these things. Each one of these things, whether you perceive them to be good or bad, has its analog in its effect. And your perception of it is going to be the primary influencer, I guess, in how the frequency affects you. So I'm trying not to be in any sort of fear about the things that are said to be really, really bad for us. Because in my belief system, it all happens for a reason and we pretty much know the outcome. So why are we wasting our energy worrying about this? Because if there is a binary analog to what that is, we are also able to access that. And one of the things about the Bible that is interesting is like put on the armor of God, right? I had a friend who was asking me, like, could we make clothing or whatever that's like 5G reflective or whatever? And I'm like, your mind is the greatest placebo that you have. Your intentions are the greatest power that you can fuel action with. Um, if you're really a believer, why do you think some sort of man-made fabric can save you or even help you? Because in my experience, um, you can be invisible if without any sort of cloaking device other than the Holy Spirit or whatever this connection is to the divinity that is most impressed in the aspect of life and creativity, creation. And it's not survival because you're running from something, but Survival means that you're running to home, right? So if you're calling out in help or need, that there should be no doubt. And if something happens, well, what about that? If something happens, something happens. Well, I mean, we don't get the full script, right? That's why people write these TV shows with cliffhangers, as they build you up to this emotional point where it's like, "Oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next?" And what happens next? You have to wait 3 months until they put out the opening, and then you're just drawn into another cliffhanger, and they drag that along as they can. These are the cycles of life that we're living in. Everybody's on some sort of, you know, "Oh, when's the next shoe gonna drop?" kind of thing, and it's insane, and I don't like it. I don't like it. How do we change it? Well, how about realizing how much power that we have, not only in ourselves in a very physical way, like the placebo effect, but also that our belief systems and our connection to these energetic things that are unseen are real. They are real. Even if they're not tangible to you, is that based on belief, or is that based off of like, well, yeah, I mean, I've heard of people having clairvoyance or talking to God or having prophetic dreams or this, that, and the other thing, but that doesn't happen to me, so it's not real. I I don't think that you can predict when the moment for you to perceive things a different way is going to happen, other than I think people who are already very interested in observing the world have a leg up in that regard, because they are looking for anomalies and abnormalities and things amiss and things that are extra beautiful and subtle nuance. Depending on the person, they have a focus that's is unique to them, that gives them secrets of the universe that few other will share, even in a similar way. But then when we take our observations and we start adding together our experiences, we get a greater and bigger picture of what is happening, which takes us to new levels of understanding and perception and sharing and all this. Like, that's what heaven is. And it's nuts to me, um, because people are really feeling hell on earth right now. And I almost feel bold enough to say that hell was always just on earth, in the greatest sense of the meaning of it, that this is the greatest point of conflict for all souls that I don't know, breathe the air, touch the ground, have the blessing of the water. Doesn't mean it's going to be sunshine and roses just because you get the benefit or the experience of those things. And that's interesting too, because people get really caught up in their lives and thinking, "Oh man, either I'm a total shitbag, da da da, and that's my life story," or like, "I deserve it all, and that's my life story," or "Nothing good comes to me, this bad," and all this. If you step outside of it and you realize that you're just incarnate as this everlasting and evolving thing who ultimately, on the spiritual sense, the non-tangible, no physicality sense, are always striving for higher and higher and higher and better and better and better and closer to what we on earth have defined as perfection. We want whatever our idealism of perfection is, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the way that it's played out on earth allows people who also have this information to act in ways that are so grotesque. And we ask ourselves, like, why is this happening? These people are so gross. Well, it kind of has to happen because people have to see how gross it can get, for one, and number two, they have to realize that the illusion of power and control from the people who are doing gross stuff is not anything that they themselves can't have in a comparable but vastly different way in regard to the level of frequency that it resonates at. So, I'm sure that there are people out there who do have what seem like materialistic, successful lives on the outside, and they are doing genuinely good things, somewhere in their life. I don't necessarily think that if you're talking about it or marketing it as a ploy to, quote unquote, bring abundance to people, like that's pretty fucking shady. So the greatest secrets of the universe have been occulted for reasons, and it's because they are powerful. But the people who make you pay for those secrets under the guise of love and light are doing the exact same thing, um, to a certain degree, where if this information is so important and so beneficial, why is it hidden? Okay, well, because let's look at the people who hide it. They misuse it, right? They misuse it. And they tell us that it's occulted because it could be misused. It's hidden because somebody might misuse it. Well, the people who are accusing that the normal person will misuse it are the people misusing it. And it's because normal people overall are really it takes influence to be drawn into such darkness. This is not the organic way of a soul coming into the world. And that's another thing that they'd have you believe is like babies can just be born as demonic. No, babies are only born in darkness when they are conceived in a ritualistic way using occulted knowledge that usurps power for a specific purpose. And does the normal person want to do that? I'm sure that if the normal loving person had a hard time with their fertility and they thought that a fertility ritual could help them, they would probably participate in it just as easily as they would pay thousands upon tens of thousands of dollars for in vitro or fertility um, assistance, right? We have this money equivalent to try and get people to take spiritual values or spiritual ideals that have been occulted and then pay for them in every way, shape, and form. And whether it's vanity or gluttony or all these other quote unquote sins, they're not quote unquote sins in the sense of, well, yeah, they are. I mean, I didn't write them. They're quote unquote sins. Uh, you can see how they're detrimental to people. And we can see that in entertainment. Frequency is so important. It's so important. Think about the voices that you like to listen to. Think about the music that you like to listen to. Think about the rhetoric that you enjoy reading. I mean, you probably attach to stuff that really resonates with something in you. And in the last week, here was my big epiphany: is I was going back through the podcasts and YouTube channels that I like to watch that are primarily dudes, men. And I realized that 90% of them were yelling at me the whole time. It's that whole loud rah, rah, rah kind of thing. And it hit my misophonia like, oh my goodness, I have to shut this off right now, because I could feel my heart racing and I felt like I was being placated and yelled at. And it was just supposed to be this thing that I was listening to while I was doing something else. But I was feeling really uncomfortable with it. And then I'm like, okay, I feel yelled at by this guy. Let me go to this one. And then I felt yelled at again. And they're not telling me anything new while they're yelling at me. I'm like, gosh darn it, at least if you're yelling at me, tell me something I haven't heard before. Um, but maybe that's the audience that they're going at, is like the audience that they want to beat over the head with information. And I would prefer to hear information by a smooth, calm voice that is pleasant to listen to and doesn't overly jar my um, sense of being every couple of seconds. So there were only a few. And they're they do introspective comedy, that's what I would call it, introspective comedy, dissemination of, basically the theory of everything, those guys. They are totally astute at paying attention to subtle nuance in all these different directions, and then they're able to amalgamate information, then put it out there for people in a way which is consumable, but also probably not basic. You have to have a certain threshold of patience just to deal with the information alone, or at least acceptance and acknowledgement of the information that exists to sit there through it. And I go through these ebbs and flows where, I'm more drawn to this person talking or this person talking, but I really don't want to listen to the people who yell at me anymore. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, because this brings me to this other idea of compounded energy through trauma, which is something I was thinking about a few weeks ago. But if you think about the trauma that you acknowledge in your own life from as early as you remember, and then there was probably some trauma before you were born, like whether your mom got into a fight with your dad, and just the spikes of cortisol and stuff that can affect the development of a fetus. All these things play an effect, but we know about epigenetics, and we also know about the passing down of trauma through DNA. So then you compound the double whammy of whatever traumas that are realizable and unrealizable that were impactful to the DNA of your parents, and then their parents and their parents. We are the pinnacle up to now. I mean, if you have kids, then we can get onto that probably at some point. But you as an individual are the pinnacle of your genetic histories, trauma, and then if you lived with a family that wasn't necessarily your genetic DNA, whatever trauma that might be. So separations, fear, anxiety, abuse, um, like, what are all the horrible things that can happen to, like, I think primarily for little kids, it's separation, fear, and I don't know. I can't speak for everyone, but being afraid of being separated from your parents or your caretaker is something that probably everybody has experienced at an early age at one point, where you're at a shopping center with your family member, and you get to wandering off looking at stuff, and they keep moving. And before you know it, you're looking down an aisle and you don't recognize anyone, if anyone's there at all. And then you go out into the main aisle and you're looking all directions trying to find them. And you don't know where they're at. And then maybe you run up to a stranger who kind of looks like, from the back, your dad or your grandpa or whoever. And you're like, I thought you left me. And they turn around and they're not the person you thought they were. So then the double whammy of trauma on yet again. Oh my God, did they actually leave me in the store? Take that feeling, compound it by a million, put it in yourself, and that might explain a lot, a lot of where people are getting diagnosed with mental illnesses and certain things that they've had to create a huge, thick book of diagnostics about, instead of, and knowingly, okay, that the people who wrote these books had a perception of these frequencies and the compounded energies that are being passed on through people. The science that we have right now comes out with these things like about epigenetics, like it's so new. Oh, we just discovered this. No, 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 no. These are esoteric, spiritual ideas, not even ideas, but realities that play very much into the physical world and have been completely hidden from you to know, because if you knew yourself that well, and if you could look at your family tree and look at your family members and be taught by your family that, oh, part of what you're going through is this historical thing that we've all gone through. Like, I think black families, black people, they are at a point now in history where people around my age are really talking about how the historical oppression of people has affected them in such a way, and they don't want to live like that anymore. And so choosing to leave it behind is a choice that they're making as individuals who are looking at the bigger picture and the greater context, instead of just getting all piled up in whatever passed on trauma is, and then exacerbating it even more. This is beautiful. This is what I want to see. And I think many cultures have that in it, but we're not looking at it that way because we're still in a place where the binary is trying to polarize to such a degree that um, there has to be a, a demon around any corner, and just when we get comfortable with something, then it gets flipped around and put somewhere else so that we ignore the fact that, wait a minute, that was nonsensical. Oh no, wait, look over here. This is crazy. This will piss you off. Oh my gosh, it does. And then the autists or whatever, they start digging and uh sharing information, basically encouraging people to share information, and then the consensus arises again. Oh, wait a minute, what are we doing? What are we doing? What is this? I am so done in so many ways with social media, because I go there and it's just being fired up about politics, and I love seeing that things are happening, but the fact that there's still the snap, crackle, and pops, I guess, of dissonance, when it just for so long has seemed so obvious that what whatever we're told we should be, or whatever is pushing us into these certain archetypal roles and boxes, is actually really not out for our best benefit. And it's like, who told you had to be that way? And why did you believe them? Well, my parents told me. Well, and I trust my parents because they're my parents. Right. But who told them? Well, their parents, and they trust their parents. But who told them? And then you look, oh, but what was their political affiliation? What was their religious affiliation? What did they have to gain from pushing that agenda? So much of what's going on is completely agenda driven. I just go through on Twitter and I just um, press the button on promoted ads and say, I do not like this ad, because they're going to try and tailor the ad experience to me anyway. But I'm getting things like Toyota's race car event and Dwar and Chanel and things that I'm not interested in at all. And I'm curious to see if they can actually give me an advertisement that I would be interested in clicking on. Um, it's nice that they've moved past the suck your belly in contour underwear. I don't know. But if you just go through and you say, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this, what are they going to do? I know that when I take that ad off of my page, to some degree, it must affect ad revenue or something, right? I'm just going to keep saying what I don't like when I see it, that's for sure. And I'm going to start saying even more what I do like when I see it. Because it seems like there's plenty of people who don't like things, but It's from a polarization that is, um, to try and fill in whatever they think they're supposed to be or whatever they want people to think that they are. And for me, like, I'd like to be who I am in whatever moment that is because it's bound to change, and the freedom to engage with people who feel that same freedom, right? Like, how many times have you seen somebody trying to be somebody that they're not to try and impress the people that they're around, and how badly that plays out so often? Or even if you're for yourself, like, I've tried to be something that I'm not to people, and, um, if you're a good actor, you can get away with it, but it's exhausting, and it's not worth it because at the end of the day, you have to let go and be yourself, and if you built yourself up to be something that you're not, well, that's problematic at best. Anyway, I know that this probably was not the most exciting thing. I'm not really sure how it sounds, if it came off all right. Might be something I delete. Um, but yeah, come back again if you see me streaming. Maybe something insightful will happen and maybe I'll like make some friends and stuff or something. I don't know. Good night.